lot of arrangements, so little, like a, huh? Yes. Good.
I feel like you're far away.
Yes.
Vamos a esperar 5 minutos a que se acabe de llenar la sala, si no les importa.
So I remember I did a Michael Cougar was sitting someplace here. It was all good.
You were not with a camera, not with an iPhone. You were taking pictures.
Like that? Yeah, I forgot. I can give you those pictures.
Yes.
Now they're in my archive. So I'll be starting. So like this.
Gracias.
Yes, I can hear you.
Espero unos minutos a que entre la gente.
Claro. Yo todo lo voy a hacer en inglés.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos por estar aquí con nosotros en esta tarde memorable del mes de noviembre, en el que vamos a presentar el primero de los actos en el que va a participar el premio Nobel ORHAN PAMUK en esta Feria Internacional del Libro de Guadalajara. Recordamos hace un minuto que esta no es la primera vez que PAMUK nos visita. Lo hizo hace 9 años, ¿no? Pues 2009, el señor aquí en primera fila me lo recuerda, con motivo de la presentación de otra de sus novelas. En esa ocasión, no sé si alguno de ustedes estaba presente, sucedió un poco lo mismo, que sacaba fotos al público, solo que en vez de hacerlo con un iPhone, lo hacía con una cámara de fotos. Incluso podía explicar en ese momento que en la presentación que le hizo con una conversación con Rosa Montero, explicó a qué destinaba cada una de las fotos. Pues hoy volvemos a tener la suerte de tenerlo aquí para el lanzamiento de su última novela publicada en turco, en español, que es La mujer del pelo rojo, una novela memorable que salió hace un año y pico en Turquía y salió este año en España y que ha venido apareciendo en los distintos países de lengua española a lo largo del año. No digo que es su última novela porque precisamente hace 2-3 semanas ORHAN entregó el manuscrito de la que será su última novela, que con un poco de suerte publicaremos no el año que viene, sino a principios del año 2020. ORHAN PAMUK, una linda presentación, uno de los autores vivos más importantes, uno de los 5 autores vivos más importantes, yo diría que de los 3 autores vivos más importantes de la literatura universal, premio Nobel, tiene más de 20 libros en su haber, traducido a 35 o 40 idiomas, y ha trabajado en su literatura fundamentalmente novelística, también tiene parte de ensayo, una mezcla de literatura que tiene que ver tanto por un lado con una literatura realista, me llamaríamos más decimonónica, más clásica, con otra literatura de acción o de intervención, con libros más largos, libros más cortos, novelística histórica, novelística actual, literatura de amor, etcétera, etcétera. Y para hablar con él, para presentarlo, tenemos otra escritora de primer nivel y otra persona absolutamente maravillosa, que también es una mujer queridísima en la casa, que es Jennifer Clement, escritora norteamericana, pero residente en México desde hace ¿cuántos años, Jennifer?
Desde los 6 meses de edad.
Desde los 6 meses de edad. Presidenta, como digo, del PEN Club Internacional y autora de 2 novelas publicadas en sello Lumen, de nuestra editorial. La primera se llamó Lady D y la segunda, que hemos publicado recientemente, se llama Amor Armado. Jennifer es una autora, ya digo, de primera línea que ha tenido montones de premios y que es extraordinariamente bien considerada por la crítica y por el público lector, y se ha ofrecido muy generosamente a compartir esta verdad con nosotros. Sin más preámbulos, les explico un poco. La idea es que Jennifer diga unas palabras y luego mantenemos una conversación pública abierta con ORHAN.
Gracias, Claudio. Bienvenidos a todos. Primero voy a leer un texto y luego voy a entrevistar a el señor Pamuk. You are really loved in Mexico. Did you notice that?
Thank you.
It is a joy today to speak of Orhan Pamuk's novel, The Red-Haired Woman, and celebrate that this book is now out in Spanish. And it is a true honor to have the author here with us this afternoon. In this work, we have a narrator who looks back on one decisive event in his teenage life, which not only changes the narrator's road, it also shapes the protagonist's inner emotional and intellectual being. In addition, this event poses the eternal question regarding free will and fate, which is one of the novel's main philosophical discussions, and mark the story like a drumbeat throughout, or the quiet heartbeat of the reader's pulse. In Pamuk's prose, the lyrical is present, the power of the story is present, and in the words of Yeats's poem called The Gift of Harun al-Rashid, and sourced from The 1001 Nights, of course, we hear the armed man speak, which means Pamuk is also a scribe of ideas and wisdom. In The Red-Haired Woman, the reader will find, among other themes, profound discussions on the relationship between fathers and sons. The narrator discusses parricide and filicide within the context of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, and in the epic poem Shahnam, the Book of Kings, written by the Persian poet Ferdowsi. This is also a symbol of one of Pamuk's interests or obsessions, a theme in other novels such as The White Castle, The Black Book, and My Name is Red, on the conflict and relationship between East and West. In the Western example of the Oedipus story, the son kills the father and seizes the future, while in the Eastern example, the father kills the son and therefore captures the future. I would also like to speak of the sky and stars. The sky is a recurring theme. Even the red-haired woman's dress is sky blue, in contrast with the well into the earth's darkness that is being dug in search of water. The reader finds oneself in heaven and in hell, and we also know that our fates might be written in the stars. At one moment, the narrator remembers thinking, "A star was falling. I felt with every bit of me that the world before my eyes coincided perfectly with the world inside my head, and I focused intently on the summer sky. If only I could decipher the language of the stars. Their disposition would surely reveal all the secrets of my life." Pamuk's novel is about the change in Turkey, and especially the changes in his beloved city of Istanbul. And it is also a book about old stories and how they transform but never really leave us. At one point, the narrator says he has learned to believe in the force of old stories. The red-haired woman made me think of what Borges, who Pamuk admires greatly, called the ancient food of heroes. Borges wrote in his essay Blindness, published in Selected Nonfiction, everything that happens, including humiliations, embarrassments, misfortunes, all has been given like clay, like material for one's art. One must accept it. For this reason, I speak in a poem of the ancient food of heroes. Humiliation, unhappiness, discord, those things are given to us to transform so that we may make from the miserable circumstances of our lives things that are eternal or aspire to be so. ORHAN PAMUK speaks to us of our relationship to stories, our fathers, love at first sight, ideas on memory, fate, and free will, and through these, he transforms us and gives us the eternal. Thank you. So my first question, which is a question that all Mexicans have to ask immediately, is how many times have you been to Mexico, and have you been anywhere that is not the Guadalajara Book Fair?
Yes, I've been to Mexico first in Mérida in 1986. And in fact, I drove from Mérida, what is the other town at the end of the peninsula, that this was 1986 when my ex-wife was doing a PhD in New York, and another Turkish couple. They said, why don't we go to Mexico when that school is closed and go and swim? And that's exactly what we did, and I enjoyed so much. So when there is a 85, then some 25 years later, when there is a new invitation, I went, and this was an invitation to come here. Then this was my second visit to Mexico was only Guadalajara, and the third visit is this. I am this time very curious to go back to Mexico City, and in my first visit, I went to Trotsky House. I'm very curious to what happened there. What the development of what happened. Also, when I first went to Diego Rivera was the star. Now Frida Kahlo is star, and no one knows who Diego Rivera is. So I will also visit their art and see what they have built for Frida Kahlo, who was superstar in the last 30 years. And when I went, when I was there, no one, she was just starting up.
Thank you. So let's get to the book. So can you tell us a little bit about how this book came to be and how you were watching these well diggers outside your window?
Oh, yes. Okay, this actually, everyone, the most popular question we writers get, beside, or the second most popular question, the first is, why do you write? And the second is, how did you find this story? And in fact, here I have a story to tell how I found this story. In 1988 or 89, I think I was trying to finish one of my novels, The Black Book, in an island close to Istanbul. And it was in August that an elderly, midlife gentleman, just like in the book, and a teenage boy came, and they began to dig a well. Maybe some information about wells in my part of the world, maybe some sociological information, or maybe I can tell this later. Maybe I'll just go into the story. Just like in the book, it was raining when they came. They made their own tent, but they were laughing about it. Then they had a little portable TV, just like in the novel. And as they worked intensely all day, they were also preparing their food for dinner. And I was paying intense writerly attention to what they were doing. You know, we writers write. It's not easy to write. So you look around, and it was nice. It was good to see a medieval well digger and his disciple, and the relationship was something like father and sons, where medieval father and sons, where the father was both teaching, scolding, crushing the son's will and spirits, while also feeding, helping, paying attention, which stayed with me because perhaps I had a father who was not that close, who never was that intensely taught me things, but who never also crushed me, never killed my will to imagine things. So this stayed with me. This is the beginnings of the story. I saw in a realistic way that they were digging a well, looking for water, and in the end, they found the water. While they were digging the well, since they were my neighbors, they began to ask me for some help. "Sir, do you have electricity? Can we take some water from your garden?" Like this. And after a while, I was also getting to be interested in them, and I said, and I do this many times today, "Can we do an interview? I'm a writer. Do you want to talk to me?" And said, "I'm a writer." I was not quote famous then. Most of the time, at that age, and you say you're a writer in Turkey, they think you're a journalist, but he didn't ask any questions. He wanted to talk. And he told a story about digging a well, digging, and not finding the water, of course. Immediately reminds us Albert Camus' myth of Sisyphus, or Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, that I always want to, by the way, also write short novels. In the end, that story and the fact that there is an almost medieval relationship between father and son, and later I learned they were not father and son. I projected fatherness and maybe the anxiety of being son to these two persons. Then that story stayed with me. But maybe I have so many projects like this. Maybe I was not going to write this, but the political situation in Turkey, not today, today is even more horrible, but some 3 years ago, that the country was choosing and preferring, in a way, some of the waters, half of the country, authoritarian ways, because there was, the father was digging the well and finding the water, because in a way he was authoritarian. He was making the sun work, so forth and so on. And that is also the ideology, or what you read in the newspapers, both in Turkey and internationally, that later developed to a more complex thing, is that people are voting for him actually because he is bringing economical growth. The same thing you hear about, you say, Modi in India, in Latin America, unfortunately these days, in Poland, in Hungary. But it was not as open as it is today, but the seeds of authoritarianism was growing, and it was, in fact, very suitable for my story. So I think, why don't I write a short novel about this subject? A sort of a philosophical inquiry into nature of civilizations, but literary inquiry, a literary inquiry into nature of civilizations, because my story also makes a comparison between Oedipus Rex and Firdausi's, the Persian poet, epic writers, a little story of Rustam and Suhrab. There are two classical stories that my novel also focuses. One is a classical story of father killing the son, and which is an Persian or Eastern story, and the story legitimizes the killing of the son and says, unfortunately, he has to kill him, we need some economical growth, and bam, bam, bam. And the other story is more about, as you gently said, killing the father and liberating yourself, and killing the father and owning the future. You said something like that. And so I thought, these are great two stories. And why don't I compare them in my novel, in a way? That Oedipus Rex and Rustam and Suhrab are symmetrical stories in which, in the Eastern story, father kills the son and the story legitimizes. And in Oedipus Rex, then the son kills the son, and the whole modern reading of that story again legitimizes the killing.
Yeah, that was my second question, that you answered it. So let's talk about love at first sight.
Okay.
Let's move on to love.
I like that subject, love at first sight. But of course, it is also related to so many things, especially in my part of the world. We put love at first sight on a pedestal because we want that to happen. I wrote a novel called My Name is Red. It was about pictures. In fact, the first working title of that novel was Love at Third Sight. Why? Because And that novel is also a sort of an encyclopedic survey of classical Sufi, Persian, Ottoman, classical Sufi tradition. And I wrote about the most popular stories because actually I was writing about painters, and painters illustrated most popular stories. My question now, I'm giving you a long answer, I'm sorry, was this, that since I was reading with the help of Borges, all the classical Sufi stories and all the classical fairy tales, when there is a motive, they do it once, they do it second time, then it happens. The girl sees the picture of the boy first time, doesn't fall in love. Sees second time, doesn't fall in love, and falls in love in the third time. And I was saying, why in the third time? In the novels, they always fall in the first time. So I, in fact, wanted to allude to this. At the age of novels, we fall in love in the first side. But it used to be, in old stories, you would fall in love in the third side. But perhaps another thing, that love at first sight implies that you fall in love with a person without much knowing him, unless he or she is exceptionally beautiful. But that means we put love at the first sight on a pedestal because we don't have much time with girls and boys, right? And this is most of the time, this happens in medieval societies or Islamic societies where boys and girls don't get together before marriage. Even if they get together for some time before marriage, it's unlikely that they're going to have sex and enjoy life or this or that. So, in order to get together and marry, they have to cherish and put on a pedestal, make big that 2 minutes meeting, so that they tell their friends, oh, I only saw him 2 minutes, but I'm in love. Actually, unfortunately, I have to marry someone that I saw for 2 minutes. The message is that. But we said love at first sight. Unfortunately, I am a realist. Also, love at first sight puts the rhetoric, a sugary rhetoric of love at the heart of marriage. You know, the girl wants to marry, at least she wants to see the boy for 2 minutes. Then either she would say yes or no. But if she says yes, love at first sight. She has to say that. Because, okay, she'll say, okay, the others were so bad, this is okay. No one says that. They say love at first sight.
Okay, your novel is also very much about the city, about Istanbul and how it's changed. In Mexico, we're very familiar with losing our cities and growing into other neighborhoods. And this coincides, this conversation, with the death of your great friend, Araguler. So the photographer who did an extraordinary chronicle of the city. Could you talk a little bit about city as character? You know, you think of Joyce's Dublin, you think of Borges's Buenos Aires.
There's so much to tell.
What about Pamuk's Istanbul?
Yes, there's so much to tell about this. Maybe I'll start with the fact that I'm an Istanbul writer. I didn't know about it when I only wrote about what I knew. And since I lived all my life, almost 65, 66 years in Istanbul, this is what I know. I wrote about it. I became to be self-conscious about being an Istanbul writer when my books begin to get translated, because reviewers were calling me Istanbul writer. I get self-conscious about it and wrote more extensively. Also, this fact is important. I was born into the city when it was 2.5 million. Now they say it's 16 million, and I was inside. So in the end, I am writing what I see, but I'm writing about humanity and life, and I saw humanity and life in Istanbul. That automatically makes me a writer of Istanbul. And the second thing, though, you're asking me qualities of Istanbul, what stayed with me. I wrote a book about autobiography, Istanbul. I'm going to talk about that now, but I'm warning you. Cities do not have eternal qualities. They change by history. by events, by politics, especially politics, really affects our understanding of cities. We don't like the politics there, we don't like the city. We have utopian dreams about politics there, we'll begin to like this city. The only things that stays the same in cities is, of course, its geography. What the eternal thing in Istanbul is Bosphorus. It's the vitality it brings to the city. But my Istanbul of 1950s, 60s, 70s, that I lived is, and I describe this in my book, Istanbul. I like it when it's winter, black and white, and a bit of melancholic, or Turkish word or Arabic word for it is hüzün. It also implies a philosophy of not venturing too much in life, not expecting too much in life. What an American scholar called the nobility of failure, that Turkish hüzün is, or Sufi melancholy is about also accepting failure, not demanding too much in life. And I argue in my book, Istanbul, that landscapes of the city also give an answer, also illustrate this feeling I got from the city. Everyone has a different city in a way. My Istanbul changed. The proof of it is that when that book was published in 2003, even then the previous generation, the next generation was telling me, no, this is not our Istanbul. We are not that sad or melancholic as you are, Mr. Pamuk. We are not happier here. They were right. Also, the tourists who are buying my book and coming with very happy, eating their ice cream and enjoying life, and see the melancholy there, they are a bit confused also. So on the other hand, our reaction to cities changed. But there is also this fact that in the last 15 years, Turkish democracy is destroyed. But on the other hand, there's an immense economical growth, that high rises. Usually the city changed. Here I have to be very careful when I'm reacting to that change, because some people are only nostalgic, while there are people who want jobs, who come to the town, who need high rises because you have to make a house for these people, you have to make bridges, you have to make new roads. It is inevitable that old cities will change. Istanbul, when I was born, half of the buildings were wooden. They were all burned down, as I wrote in my Istanbul. Cities change. That I'm not saying, oh, please preserve my Istanbul. Why? Oh, it looks so nice. I don't care about your lives. I never say this. But on the other hand, there is a fact that it should also be preserved. Ara Güler, the great photographer of Istanbul, who died a month ago, my friend, he captured that Istanbul, and I also used his photos in my books. I'm sad about this. I wrote an article, maybe it's also published in El País. Mm-hmm.
So what about your friend?
Ara Güler, he's a great photographer. He is my friend, but we were, I would address him in saying you in plural, while he would address me you with singular. I was respectful, I met him when I was not very well known. I respect him. He is a great photographer of Istanbul, lived for 90 years at least. I'm happy. He didn't live a very happy life, but he did as an artist, or he never considered photography as an art. He took great photographs. I'm looking at them all the time.
Yeah, beautiful photographs. So at one point in the book, the narrator remembers an aphorism his father had taught him, expressing the ambivalence of officials toward gifted writers and writers who criticize their regimes. The aphorism is, poets must first be hanged, then mourned at the gallows.
Yes.
Wait, I have to say one thing too. As president of PEN, these words hit me hard. In our PEN case list today, we have 43 poets in prison for writing poetry. So how does this aphorism reflect Turkey today?
That expression used a lot about Nazım Hikmet, a Turkish communist poet who spent between 1938 and 1950, he was in prison. He is the darling poet of of the Turkish leftist liberals, now even the nationalists like him. But I've heard this so many times, even also written in newspapers by the writers close to establishment. And the way this expression used, maybe I'll repeat the expression that I used in the novel, that in Turkish newspapers, in the culture, I would, as a young person, we would see elders, meaning here I mean established persons, established, great poets. But you have to hang him and also cry. There's also this addition that you cry under the. So, and I use this expression in the novel also to discuss this expression. It is a legitimization of cruelty of the state. They put Nazım Hikmet into prison. The guy who says, oh, you have to cry, is actually legitimizing the fact that he is in prison because he has ideas that the guy doesn't have. The cruelty to the artist that tells the truth is in that story. But that cruelty is also a public cruelty, organized cruelty, not a single person's cruelty. It is sort of to say that you have to hang the poet, wonderful poet, and cry afterwards is a legitimization of curtailing the voice of the poets that you are unfortunately paying attention or, you know, counting one by one. Yes.
Terrible. Yeah. I have to say I was at Silivri prison that appears.
I'm sorry?
I was at the prison
yes.
that appears in the last part of your novel, and you know, talking about melancholy and this aphorism, the coffee shop, and actually this could have been Mexico. It was amazing. The little tiny metal coffee shop outside the jail was called the Last Hope Coffee Shop. And I thought that's Turkish, but it's so
yes,
Mexican.
But all my life, when we were looking at Soviets, we are reminded by, well, when there is repression, people's humor develop. This was also true about Turkey, but in this last 1 year, there is more repression, even the humor is not going out. You don't see a lot of humor. And one reason for this that there is not even magazines, places that you can exchange this humor. There are in some Twitters by the sides, but even Soviet humor was more abundant. This I'm telling, really, we are in an exceptionally bad political shape. I hope it will change.
Yeah, because of course if you can laugh, it doesn't hurt as badly.
Sorry?
If you can laugh, it doesn't hurt as badly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so could you speak a little bit about part 3, where suddenly the book is in the voice of a woman?
In the end, with the help of my female character, I was also doing this. The first story, these are Oedipus, Sophocles, Oedipus Rex. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about how it came to be so prominent. Sophocles is, as we all know, classical Greek author, but he was not, and Oedipus was not as famous as it is today. But in 1860s, in Vienna, they put him on a stage. In Paris, they rediscovered and put him on a stage, and suddenly it was very successful. Whole Paris was going to Oedipus Rex. Then they also wanted to do it some 20 years later in Vienna, and Dr. Sigmund Freud also watched, he enjoyed, and he had already many ideas about fathers killing or sons killing fathers. He said, oh, this is interesting. And don't forget that he also wrote about Brothers Karamazov, where Smerdyakov, the fourth son, kills the father. So here is another story, the son. So he wrote so much about it. I sometimes jokingly say that if Marx wasn't writing about Balzac so much, we wouldn't know Balzac in Turkey, at least. If Freud wasn't writing about Oedipus Rex in such a deep way, I am teaching at Columbia University. At the top of the university, as a Shakespeare, Sophocles. I am sure Freud also helped to that. But why was this? What happened? Actually, in classical old times, Sophocles' son killing the father, that the audiences did not approve son killing the father. The text of the play is, in fact, about God. God says to Oedipus, "You're gonna kill your father. I know. This is your fate." The oracle tells this fact. So he is an individual. That's what I underline. He wants to run away from this fate. In pre-modern times, if you're a good boy, then whatever God says, you obey. But he disobeys, and audiences don't like it. But in the end, he blinds himself. He is satisfied, giving a Hollywood ending. Okay, the bad guy is punished. Why is Oedipus bad in Sophocles, as Sophocles understood it? Because God said something, and you have to obey. But he wanted to invent his own individuality and run away from God's verdict, and of course he couldn't do it. While the French and Vienna and Freud and we moderns take on it, we look at his individuality. We are not happy and as he blinds himself. But when we are crying for Oedipus, we are also ignoring his crime. But his crime is not listening to God, is killing his father and also sleeping with his mother Mary. I can't even tell it. I'm also exaggerating. Yes. Our modern take on Oedipus underlines individuality, while the story of Firdevsi, the Eastern story, crushes the individuality. I thought, let me read this story, let me compare these stories together and intertwine it with my authoritarian well-digger and his confused son, or what I thought to be a son.
But you still haven't answered why the third person in the voice.
Okay, having said that, having made this, I'm sorry, I decided now, with the help of Borges, to deconstruct these stories in a way. And I thought, everyone is crying, and these tears are legitimizing individuality or authoritarianism. But in the end, women are crying all the time, and men are being individual or authoritarian. Men in these two classical stories are the actors, and women are, I wouldn't say decoration, but are minor actors. So I wanted to see the story, this time through the eyes of the red-haired woman. And I wrote a third chapter where she revisits the story and and like a glow, takes the glow outside and retells the story.
Yeah, it's fascinating when that happens, and it's completely unexpected. So I just want to talk just a little bit, and then maybe we can have a question or two, because this is a book fair, and we're people that love books in this room, and about intention, literary intention. You said in your Nobel speech, "What literature needs most to tell and investigate today are humanity's basic fears." Do you think you could tell us a little bit more about
then
this?
In continuation, I said, humanity's basic fears are not only economical or about protection, finding enough food, finding some security. Once you find enough food, once you have a shelter and look at for your future and you're settled about these essential matters, the third thing I've seen all of my life, so for 55, 60 years, whatever, is that what we may call in a negative way vanity, or our identities, our places in the world, how important we are. These are also very essential things, and there is no literature without them. The literature is only also about how others see us and how we see others. Literature is a representation of others' representation of us. Literature is also being worried about, people worry about how others think about themselves. And if we raise this to national or regional awareness, all the nations who think they are misrepresented, all the groups, all the peoples who are hurt, angry because they think they are misrepresented, these are also important subjects. These subjects lead to cosmopolitanism, nationalism, authoritarianism, conservatism. These are my subjects. In the end, there is political liberation, but there is also the liberation of the individual. There is the weight of history, but then we are free that we can do anything. We are, yes, formed by the weight and strength of history, but then we have our own consciences. God gave us conscience, or whatever we have, nature gave us conscience, and we can decide what to do, what not to do. And in a way, no matter how much history, ethics matters, whatever, but we can also make our own decisions. My argument, although I use old stories, talk about history, write historical novels, but history has definitely, of course, weight in our lives, but we are also human beings. We can turn our back to our history. We can invent a new world. We are not slaves of history, though knowing about history also liberates us.
Thank you. I was going to ask you about Bob Dylan getting the Nobel Prize.
Okay, I'll tell you.
I was seeing if I had the courage to ask you, but I had some fear.
Unfortunately, after he got the Nobel Prize, for 2 months, that's the most popular question I ask every place. And I avoided to answer, but once, now that 2 years passed, I can talk about it. Once in my class is student asks. The class finishes and the student raises his hand. What do you think? I was angry about that. Why? Because I said, this has nothing to do with our class. Of course, this is a joyless authoritarian professor. I don't want to be that. So I say, okay, now the second answer. Second thing, because they asked me so many times, everyone loves Bob Dylan in America. He is so much. And I also studied architecture for 4 years, and when between 1970 and 74, and when I was drawing and I was so bored, I would listen to his music all the time, and I had not cassettes, records, and once a song finished, then the next song I begin singing before him. So that's you. So I like also him. I also like Bob Dylan. So the problem was that, so you have to also answer that, because, oh, we love him so much. But honestly, it was a bad mistake they did. Nobel Prize for Literature should be given to literature, to people who are famous for literature. Next year they gave it to a journalist, and the next year afterwards, you know, I am a bit upset about these decisions. But in the end, it's hard to express this because A, everyone likes Bob Dylan. B, they wanted to find an American.
Okay, thank you. Claudio, do we have time for questions or no? No. Okay.
La mala noticia es que no tenemos tiempo para preguntas. Peor noticia todavía es porque hubiéramos seguido horas y horas hablando con Orhan. Pero la buena noticia son dos. Una, que ahora firma libros en el módulo de firmas. Y segunda buena noticia, que mañana a las 12 inaugura el Salón Literario en este mismo recinto. Y tercera buena noticia, que el lunes participará en la gala de los lectores también. O sea que tenemos Orhan para
bueno, no tenemos tiempos para preguntas, pero sí para un gran aplauso.